When you talk about challenges inside a PST migration project, we typically kind of segment into three groups of challenges. The first group is what we call the discovery group, i.e. finding the data. The second group of challenges is inside the actual transport of the data, centralization of the data. And the third area that contain a lot of challenges is the so-called processing area of migration. So dealing with the individual content of the files. So those are the three main areas we kind of put challenges into. Discovery of files has a, first of all, you need a lot of data to be able to manage the process. So discovery of data is ensuring that you find data everywhere there's data. And you find it in such a fashion that you actually tell who is the owner of that data. So you need to find data on clients, not only on desktops fixed in the office, but you also need to do it on laptops that are moving around. You may even need to do it in remote offices where that's spread around the globe even, and you still want to know what's out there and who owns the data. And the second challenge is also to understanding from the data that's out there, how much of that data is actually used. Is it used daily? Is it used within the last 3 months? How much of that data out there is actually copies of copies that you may want to deal with differently when you talk about the ingestion at the other end of this chain of movement of data. So discovery has a lot of challenges, also in the sense that I need to ensure that when I discover data that I do it on a continuous basis, because this is changing. People are creating new files, they're deleting files, so the discovery process also needs to understand what's going out there in the environment at any given point when you're in the migration phase. So discovery, a lot of challenges in that area. Centralization is one of the hardest challenges that you have, because what's happening is that we're dealing with data that the users are actually using, and that daily. Every time you log onto your computer, you go into Outlook and you have your PST files and you have data in there that you use. So when you're trying to centralize the data, you need to do that in such a fashion that you support the users, not only that they're moving around. Let's take an example. We start a guy and want to move a 6 GB file from his laptop to the central place where we can migrate it. While that's happening, the guy moves from a meeting room to his desk, sits down there for 20 minutes, do some work, undock again and go to the next meeting room. And in that phase he's been on one wireless segment, then he moved into the corporate LAN network, and then he moved back into a wireless LAN point. In all that time we need to move data. We can't wait on the user being stable somewhere. So you have data outside of the main office in small offices that are not well connected. There you need to transport gigabytes of data without actually overloading the line that you have for doing business during the day. Then you could say, oh, I'll just move the data movement to the night. That doesn't work because the user's not online during the night. So there's a lot of challenges here that you need to deal with in the transport of the data into the central place. And doing it transparently to the user is what's the real challenge here, that the user doesn't see it. Not in the actual upload or the data, but also doesn't feel it on his daily work, doing his work on his laptop or his desktop in the office or remote. So big challenge inside this area. Processing the data is, like I say, the challenge of putting it into the backend is relatively simple, but you have a lot of challenges in the sense that you got to understand the PST files in the environment out there could have been created back in 1996. And the guy has been adding data to these PST files ever since. So you have to deal with old data formats of PST files. The earlier versions of Outlook were not as good as adding data to PST files, so you have a higher degree of corruption you need to deal with. You have users that way back in 19-something has added a password, and when you migrate, you could say, I just detach the file, move it in, and try to ingest it. But there you need the password. But guess what? The user can't remember the password because he did it so many years ago. And because he's had it attached to Outlook so long, he's forgot the password. So that's a process you need to deal with and need to think about. And in large organizations, we see up to 3-4% of all files being password protected. So that in itself is a challenge to deal with. Okay? There's further challenges in the processing of data, and that is, how do I deal with backup copies? So you have one copy of a PST file called archive, which is 1.2 gigabyte. You have another copy that's called archive backup 2, which is like 1 gigabyte. What do you do with those two files? Do you ingest both of them? Can you be sure that data in the backup copy is all in the new copy? No, you can't. You need to actually look at the content and ensuring that you get all of this data ingested. So quite a lot of challenges in ensuring that we get all the data moved. And on the other side, also not too much data moved in, because you don't want to move the full content or the full amount of PST files into the target system. That will be way, way, way too much data for most customers. So process areas, big challenges inside that area.